Welcome, everyone. My name is Doreen Marshall. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and caring about this issue. It warms my heart to see so many people who do care and are working to close this illegal, immoral prison. The torture and inhumane treatment has been a stain on this country around the world. International treaties against torture have been ignored. There is blowback from Guantanamo to Bagram to Pelican Bay Prison here at home. This will be discussed further during our call to action. Please stay to support President Biden's efforts to close Guantanamo Prison at 1:30. We are also asking for donations, if you are able, to two organizations, witnessagainsttorture.com and closeguantanamo.org. Links will be put in the chat periodically. Also, we are putting the link to Mansour Adayfi's book that is being published in August. It can be pre-ordered from the link. And as I get ready to enter, JB, would you like to explain to everyone how the Zoom process will work?
Hi, everybody. We're so glad everyone could make it today. Our event will be recorded. And so if you'd like to be anonymous, please turn off your video and you can go ahead and change your Zoom name, or you can just catch us on our Facebook live stream. That's in the same event page you saw on Facebook. It should be in the discussion right now. Another tip I'll say is please be mindful of what's on your camera, right? Sometimes it's easy to forget that, we're all being recorded on Zoom. And so, yeah, just be mindful of what's in front of your computer screen. Out of respect for all of our panelists today, everyone's going to remain muted for the day, but we are going to have a question and answer section later when you can send your questions directly to our volunteers who have Q&A in their name. And we'll give you some more instructions when we get to that point in the event today. The last thing I want to mention is that there is a Facebook group, a more permanent group attached to this event that you can find on the Facebook event page. In the details of that event page, in case you want to stick around, make more connections, stay in the loop, and to talk to each other. So thank you again.
Okay, as I get ready to introduce our first speaker, Andy Worthington, I want to just mention that as of today, February 21st, 2021, the prison has been open for 6,982 days. You can find this updated every day on Andy's website under Gitmo Clock. Andy Worthington is a freelance investigative journalist, the author of The Guantanamo Files, and a co-director with Polly Nash of the documentary film Outside the Law, Stories from Guantanamo. He is known as a world authority on Guantanamo. He is the co-founder of closeguantanamo.org. Andy has worked tirelessly for almost 2 decades to get this horror closed. I call him the godfather of Guantanamo because he cares about each and every person who is and has been incarcerated in the prison. This is what a godfather does. Andy recently wrote, quote, "After 4 long and horrible years in which Donald Trump essentially sealed Guantanamo shut, the arrival in the White House of Joe Biden offers a glimmer of hope that prisoner releases will resume and that there will be movement towards the eventual closure of the prison. However, as with Obama, it may well be a struggle." Thank you, Andy, for all your hard work and for joining us today.
Thank you, Doreen. I'm so glad when we first spoke about this, and now it's finally happening and all that organizing. But also that there seem to be a lot of people taking part in this event. Yeah, it's really good to see. So thank you everyone for working on it, getting this to happen. And what I'm going to do is just give a little overview of the situation at Guantanamo. And then I'm sure that all of you are wanting to hear very much from Mansour Adayfi, former prisoner in Serbia, who's also a very special guest tonight, more of a special guest than I am. But I thought that if I gave a context for things, then Mansour would be able to specifically talk about his experiences of particularly prisoners that are still held. And I know that he has some very good friends, the people he cares about deeply, who are still held in the prison. And I think that would be brilliant to focus us all on what we're actually asking Joe Biden to do, which is to, one way or another, bring justice to 40 human beings who are still held at Guantanamo. They all have their own stories. So I'm looking forward to that myself. It's around about 15 years since I began working full-time on Guantanamo. It was around this time 15 years ago that a number of things happened. A film called The Road to Guantanamo was released, which dramatized the experiences of 3 young British men who had been captured and had ended up at Guantanamo. Moazzam Beg's autobiography was published 15 years ago, which I devoured eagerly, and that also helped me to understand much more about Guantanamo. And it was also the time that the Associated Press won a lawsuit against the Pentagon, which obliged them finally to release to the world the names of the people they had been holding at Guantanamo for over 4 years. So at that point, in March 2006 it was, the United States government of the Bush administration had not told the world who it was holding at Guantanamo. There were family members of people held at Guantanamo who had no idea that their children, their husbands, whatever, were at Guantanamo until the list was published of who was being held there. In most cases, you know, the International Committee of the Red Cross had got information to the families. They were the only people outside of the United States and people approved by the United States who objectively were able to help the prisoners to communicate with the outside world. Otherwise, everything was shut off. And that's really, you know, from the beginning should have been why people were concerned about Guantanamo, because here was a naval base in Cuba, which the United States had managed to hold on to after a war over a century ago, where the United States had set up a prison and had clearly done that because they had presumed that it would be beyond the reach of the courts, which meant that this was a facility where what they intended to do were things that they were not allowed to do. And in the early days, as I'm sure we all know, what that involved was a variety of sometimes formalized and sometimes less formalized torture programs. From my understanding of you know, what I could work out from having studied this in great detail when I was writing my book, The Guantanamo Files, is that there was a period in those first few years when around 1/6 of the men who were held at Guantanamo, so this was probably at the peak of the prison's population, so over 100 men were subjected to a variety of the torture techniques that involved sleep deprivation and the extreme use of extreme heat and cold, preying on people's phobias, forced nudity, shackling in painful positions, playing loud music, all of these things. These particular programs came to an end after June 2004, when the prisoners first won their right to habeas corpus, the right to go before an impartial judge and to ask why they were being held. The Bush administration then colluded with Congress to try and stop habeas from having any impact, which they successfully did for 4 years, except that lawyers were allowed into the prison. That broke the veil of secrecy, which had been what the Bush administration relied on to do what it wanted with impunity to the men who were held there, because it really thought that no one could see, no one could find out. And the lawyers actually started to bring the stories of the prisoners out of Guantanamo. But it took until 2008 for the men to get habeas corpus rights granted again by the Supreme Court, and this time they were constitutionally guaranteed. And they followed the only time in Guantanamo's history when the law has truly applied. And over 3 dozen prisoners had their habeas corpus petitions considered by the district courts in the district court for the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. And in a majority of these cases, the decisions were taken by the judges that that the United States had not come up with a good reason for holding these men, that the very low evidentiary hurdle that was required to prove that they were in any meaningful way connected to Al-Qaeda or the Taliban had not been met by the United States government. And these men were ordered to be released. And in dozens of these cases, the men were. And as I say, that is really the only time that the law applied at Guantanamo. What happened after that was that cynical conservative judges in the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. started changing the rules in ruling after ruling to try and make sure that the prisoners' habeas corpus was gutted of all meaning. And they succeeded. They ended up in the end with ruling that everything that the government said that purported to be evidence had to be presumptively regarded as accurate unless it could be, conclusively proven that it wasn't. This was a bag of lies and innuendo and tortured statements that purported to be evidence, but it put the prisoners in such a position that how are you supposed to defend yourself when you're stuck in Guantanamo with no access to anything that can help you? So, all of this sadly was happening by the time this was all reversed, and by the time that habeas was shut down, was happening under President Obama. And although he had promised to close the prison, he found himself facing a very cynical and principled assaults by the Republicans on everything that he tried to do to fulfill his promise to close Guantanamo. They made it extremely difficult to release prisoners. They prevented the administration from releasing prisoners to certain countries. Having said that, I think that Obama failed to, in the end, before he left office, as commander-in-chief, overcome all of the obstacles that had been placed in his way to do something more definitive than he did to finally close the prison. But, we could argue about that, and many of us have, about the extent to which this is true and the extent to which he really had his hands tied so much. There were roughly 240 men when he took office, and by the time he left, there were 41 men left. And as I'm sure we all remember, when Donald Trump was president for 4 years, that number went down from 41 to 40. Just one man was released. He was a man who'd reached a plea deal in his military commission trial, whereby in exchange for him providing evidence, he would be released to ongoing imprisonment in Saudi Arabia. And that's what happened. And Trump was told, you have to release this man. But for the rest of his presidency, he was true to the tweet that he sent out even before he was inaugurated. There must be no more releases from Gitmo, he said. And he wasn't interested in releasing people, and he didn't have to. And that, again, is really the heart of the problem of Guantanamo, because this is a prison where the law still doesn't fundamentally apply. If the president decides that he doesn't want you released from Guantanamo, there is nothing that anyone can do about it. And this was in spite of the fact that 5 of the men held had been approved for release by high-level review processes established under President Obama. There was no legal requirement that the men were released, so Donald Trump was not interested. An existing review process that he inherited from Obama was the periodic review boards. These were kind of like a parole hearing, except that normally when you have parole, it's because you've been convicted of something, whereas the men in Guantanamo haven't. But it was designed by Obama to overcome some of the opposition by allowing the prisoners to make a case that it was safe to release them. Mansour is one of these people who was released as a result of this. And it led to 36 men being released from Guantanamo who otherwise would not have been. So, the situation that we now have is that suddenly the opportunities for there to be movement on Guantanamo are back. If you like, this is Obama 2. This is returning to where we left off 4 years ago. And I think the big issues are that I don't think that we should doubt that there are people within the administration who would like to see Guantanamo closed, because they know that it's an embarrassment, and that it is, as I often call it, a legal, moral, and ethical abomination. Most of the men held at Guantanamo are held indefinitely without charge or trial. There are no other circumstances in which that happens. And in fact, there are no circumstances in which that is allowed to happen in countries that claim to respect the rule of law. If you hold people indefinitely without charge or trial, that's what dictatorships do. So I know, and you all know, I hope that people in the administration know this. The problem, as was the case under Obama, is how much political capital President Biden is prepared to spend to pursue an issue that is not widely popular amongst the American public, and that continues to be something that will antagonize Republicans, because they've decided that it's a great thing to try and bash Democrats on whenever Democrats try to be more progressive than Republicans on the Guantanamo issue. But I do very much hope that we are going to see this review process revived, and that it will be meaningful. Because what happened over the 4 years of Trump is that not only one prisoner, right at the end of his presidency, was approved for release as a result of this parole type system. In fact, the prisoners all started boycotting it throughout Trump's 4 years, because they had concluded correctly that it had become a sham. With President Biden in the White House, the message can go to the panels that are conducting the periodic reviews that actually what they need to be doing is trying to approve the release of prisoners if they can establish a case that, that they shouldn't still be held. Really, people shouldn't still be held nearly 20 years after this hellhole opened, unless the government has a case against them, unless the government is going to prosecute them. So hopefully there'll be more Q&A later. I really don't want to go on and on. As I was saying before, I'm sure that you're all actually waiting to hear from Mansour. And then we're going to hear from James. And I hope that we have a very interesting Q&A session afterwards, hopefully where we can dig into a few of these issues a bit more, about what we might be able to expect from President Obama and President Biden, and what we should be demanding from him. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andy, for taking the time to be with us. And I want to let people know that we are very fortunate, because later in the program, Andy is going to be performing live one of his songs, Fighting Injustice. So remember, everybody, to get your questions in your mind. We will have the session after the last speaker, and to take note of the donation links in the chat. Our next speaker is Mansour Adayfi. At the age of 18, Mansour left his home in Yemen for a cultural mission to Afghanistan. He never returned. Kidnapped by warlords and then sold to the US after 9/11, he was disappeared to Guantanamo Bay, where he spent the next 15 years as prisoner number 441. He is a very talented writer, and his book, Don't Forget Us Here, is about to be published in August. You can click on the link in the chat to pre-order the book. As a prisoner in what became known as the world's most notorious prison, Mansour was an innocent young man emerging from its darkness. Arriving as a stubborn teenager, Mansour survived the camp's infamous interrogation program and became a feared and hardened resistant fighter, leading prison riots and hunger strikes. Nicknamed Smiley Troublemaker, Mansour was also a student, writer, and historian. Today, Mansour will offer us an unprecedented window into one of the most secretive places on earth, and the people, detainees and guards alike, who lived there with him. Welcome, Mansour Adayfi, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. Hi, everyone. First, I would like to welcome you all And I would like to thank you all on my behalf and behalf all the brothers who were detained at Guantanamo and the people who are still there. Such meeting and such activities mean a lot to the brothers and to the case. The fact is, one of the most effective tools that help us at Guantanamo, the media coverage, like that's what help us to move on in our cases, whether through the demonstration or through the activities that all of you actually, most of you, all of you participated in those activities. And through the years at Guantanamo, we actually, those activities, when we used to receive news from our lawyers about the people who stood with us and support us at that time, it meant a lot to us. It meant like there is people still thinking about us because at Guantanamo, it was a crazy journey. And I would like to start from Guantanamo. It was a place where around 50 nationalities, 20 languages, 780 men end up there, age between, maybe you'll be surprised for the first time to hear that, between 1 month old and the oldest detainee was 105 years old. I think brother Jimsy met one of them there. So we ended up at Guantanamo in a place where like totally disconnected to the world. We had no idea at all where we were and what to expect and why we were there. And those questions remain for some time, like after like few months, we knew we were at Guantanamo, still like, what's Guantanamo? Like we have to figure out what's Guantanamo and where is it? But the remaining question, like the hardest question was why we were there and until when and to where we will be released, especially as a Yemeni background and people who like can go back to their home countries. It was like those challenging questions and nobody can tell you why you were there. Guantanamo kept evolving, like started from the makeshift cages to shipment containers to then a cement prison. So I think Guantanamo is one of the biggest cases in the 21st centuries, and the trial of for the people who are still there, or some of the people who are still there, it's one of the longest trial in history. I think it will be the longest. Guantanamo is a place or a zone with no law, no legal basis there, no protocols, nothing actually. Like when we arrived there, there was they didn't know what to do with us. They didn't know how to deal with us. I'm like, there was, you know, like even there was some conflict between the generals who ran the camp. Some of them wanted to apply Geneva Convention. The other wanted like to start like extracting the information because the only reason the people were there just it is like to get to be interrogated and get information. That's what we told. In the first 3 months, we went and Camp X-ray, we went in hunger strike, and one of the generals, when he came to talk to us, he said 90% of you guys should be here according to the interrogation we have conducted here. And after what he said, he was ousted from his position and has to leave Guantanamo because like he shouldn't said what he said. When he moved to Camp Delta, the arrival of the General Miller, this is what the serious and the torture and the enhanced interrogation torture started there, and started writing the SOP. So like still again, it was like everything is changing almost like the SOP, like standard procedure operation starts changing almost like every 2 weeks once. In the last 15 years when I was there, it almost like has changed for almost like 84 times. Everything keeps changing. I remember when brother James he arrived as chaplain to ease cultural tension in the detention. He arrived at the time when General Miller arrived. So General Miller had a new plan, which is turning Guantanamo into a human lab to experimenting on the detainees, like to experiment people there like the way, like they tried to find a way how to interrogate the people, how the people communicate, because like it was at that time, it was, they headed to a long and big war against what they call terrorism. So they need to find a way how to interrogate those people and how we will communicate, how the people operate. So they started designing some kind of rules for each camp and move people around. Like we were like, even the people who were interrogated, like it's kind of different category of age. Like they would take like between 13 to 15 years until like 7 years old, put them under the same interrogation. And there was no basis, any legal basis for anything. They started what they call PRP, started as ARP. That was the first time, like they just classified everyone as enemy combatant. Then the second one, like, was in 2006, again, like to review the cases, it was CSR. Then when Obama came to run the camp, Obama came to an office, they started the review in 2009 and they cleared some people. Then again, in 2014, they started what's called the PRP. So like that change, they don't have any protocol or they have any kind of system that identify who should stay or who should leave. Because actually no one, like most detainees shouldn't be there in the first place. When Trump came to an office, he changed the PRP, changed the protocol. They said now you have to go in front of before the PRP, and you have to admit to all the charges the PRP will bring against detainees. If the detainee refuse, he will never be cleared. So most detainees start refusing to participate on those PRPs. We grew up. I spent almost like 15 years of my life at Guantanamo, almost like half of my life at Guantanamo. And we tried to survive day by day. I mean, I think after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mercy and our faith, we just submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything can happen, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because like taking the matter seriously, like it's not gonna help. Fighting with them, it's not gonna help. We tried to do our best, go on hunger strike, protest, but everything was turned against us. We always told that we are launching jihad against US government. It's like, guys, we are fighting for the basic of human right in this detention. But they would never listen until our voice came out of the detention and still come out to the media. Things starting to change around. Like again, it's the media and the public opinion that would affect the detention there. So I would like to talk about some of the brothers there. I will talk about first of all Saifullah Bracha, the oldest detainee at Guantanamo, of age like 73 years old now. Since I know him in 2000, I met him in 2005 in Camp 5. We were like under very harsh condition, and he was under pressure from interrogation. Like one of the most ridiculous accusation I have ever heard in my life. Like I remember, like one of the accusations, they said he was mediating to buy a nuclear bomb from China to Al Qaeda. Like in 2014, when the interrogator came back, the same interrogator who was interrogating him in that time, like he was an old man, he was laughing. He said, like, just forget about it. Shasha is a very a well-educated man, sense of humor, and treat everyone as his own kids. Like that, we call him Shasha, or father. Spent his time teaching detainees and guard alike at the same time, and he told us over, all of you are like my kids. So in 2014, when the CIA interrogator came back to talk to Shasha, Shasha was talking to him about, like, you know, Shasha always like have a sense of humor. So like, have you found anything new? Listen, please don't bring those ridiculous, stupid, you know, like things. So it is a big mess, and the mess must be cleaned. Shasha, when I was with him, we spent his time teaching detainees English. We study with him English and business, and we prepare a business plan at Guantanamo. He had a heart disease, which like I always like pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he lives soon. And if I get chance, I would take his place, because I would like him to leave and spend some time with his family, because it was hard to see him when he got heart attack. Like it was one of the hardest moments watching our brothers dying one after another. 9 people died there. Some of them died under mysterious condition. Some of them, one of them heart attack, the other one has like cancer, but the rest still, we had no clear clue what happened to them. Shasha lived with us like in that block, and we just on our, all of us in the camp watching Shasha, like wishing and praying nothing happened to him. And the last heart attack he got in January this year, and I don't know what's going to happen to him. It is keeping those people there indefinitely. It is a death sentence. That's what I call it. Doesn't matter, because depriving someone from his freedom, this is by itself is torture. Keeping someone locked in a small box, it is torture. Those men have families, business. I remember Shasha, how his life destroyed, his family, his business, and everything in his life. Many of us. And the youngest detainee at Guantanamo is Hassan bin Atash. When he brought you to Guantanamo, he was only 18 years old. He was arrested in Pakistan and sold to the CIA at the age of 16, sent to Jordan, where he spent 1 year under torture. Then they sent him again to the black site in Kabul, spent 1 year or 1 year and a half. Then he was brought to Guantanamo. When he brought to Guantanamo, a group of them like Abd al-Salam al-Hila, Ali al-Kazimi, and Hassan. Ali al-Kazimi, he was severely tortured. Sometimes he always has blackout, just lost memories. Abd al-Salam always like also the same thing. Hassan specifically, like they have nothing against him. He has done nothing. He gets a young boy. He was like in the restaurant and playing games and driving cars, teenager. They told him, your only ticket out of Guantanamo just to witness against your brother. And this is the deal since 2010. Like they told him, you will never leave unless you witness against your own brother. That's it. Like also the man who left, who released during Trump administration, the same thing. He has to plead guilty, and he has to, I was with him, I was talking to him and translate some of his paper. And the general who struck a deal with him, he told him, you have to admit to those charges. One of it, the attack on one of the ship in Yemen, in Aden. He said, but I have no idea. He said, we need to give our friends something. So he was forced to witness against people. He just struck a deal because they don't have any evidence to prosecute those people. So they trying to turn detainees against each other, and this is the only way of those people. This is just examples. Mu'ad al-Alawi, one of the artists, he is a teacher. Khalid, also an artist, singer, teacher. Those, my brothers and my friends, we live together. There is no different, no accusation. People want to live their life. They work hard. They try study English. They try to prepare their life after Guantanamo. But as I told you, there is no protocol. There is no set of system that people get released. If your name comes to the PRBs, you get lucky. If I remember during my PRP, I was told, listen, you have to make them like you. I remembered when I was reading one of the books, Hunger Game, the same thing when the people went to the arena, they said, if you want to get sponsored by the public, you have to make them like you. It's the same thing. But even the PRP process changing like every time. So it's like become harder and harder to release people. There is people still there who was cleared in 2009, 2 of them. So They weren't lucky. They weren't like made by any delegation, and they weren't sent to any country. They just stayed at Guantanamo. As simple as that. So I would like to talk also about, sorry to bring those important cases, the hunger strike, where we started the first month when we arrived at Guantanamo. There is brothers at Guantanamo for the last 15 years, Ghassan al-Atayfi, for over 10 years, Ahmed Rabbani, also like over 10 years, not just in hunger strike, in force feeding. Even in those force feeding, those doctors, some of the doctors, turn the hunger strike to a tool of torture. Sometimes they would stop feeding the detainees until like they went to the brink of death, and they were set feeding again. So they tried to force him to stop the hunger strike that happened with us over and over again. It's like it was war between us and the doctors. We tried to explain to them, nobody wants to die, but we have no other way. Like it's peaceful protests, and we need something has to be done with our cases. But even our hunger strike were turned against us. It wasn't hard to even do hunger strike. We had to spend 40 to 50 to 60 days just on water until you reach the point where they will feed you. So they become very smart in mastering the force feeding. Not the detainees, the one who just suffer at Guantanamo. I watched many guards who also suffer and conflicted to carry their orders, because when they came to work at Guantanamo, they found the situation when they mix with us and talk to us, and they spend some of their life with us talking to us. Like many of them like us, this is the wrong. We are sorry, but they have to carry their orders. I think one of them is Jimsy. I remember when he tried to help us when he arrived at Guantanamo during Miller. It was like really intense mistreatment, and it was like the beginning of the enhanced interrogation technique. We were complaining to James as like chaplain, and he tried to help, but General Miller view him as an obstacle. So simply they accuse him of as a spy. Like we were surprised and shocked. Chaplain, like captain, like the first army chaplain arrived at Guantanamo. So it's not the first, sorry. So accused as spy, it was like a shock to all of us. Even we sent letters to the Cabinet administration, to the ICRC, tried to defend this man, but nothing happened. So as Guantanamo, it keep changing, and like it was unclear what's going to happen to us there. And this is one of the hardest things. Being there, you don't know until when what's going to happen to you, and being isolated of your family, and just every time you think what the news I will get. Like many of us receive news losing families, wives, kids, and the more you stay at that place, the more you become, we said not weaker, it's just devastated over and over again. One of the things I noticed at Guantanamo was like when we moved in 2010, when they after they closed the solitary confinement, we will move to the communal living. I noticed that we were talking about the previous years we spent at the detention, because before Guantanamo, we had no life together. So we started, when we mixed with our brothers, we started to construct memories and life together. When we met again in the communal living, we start relive those memories over and over again, because this is what we have in common. And I found that we are going deeper and deeper in our prison. And this is one of the things when like being isolated or disconnected to the world. You think you have some freedom, but at the same time, you start with your brothers. When you meet them after years, you remember like the hunger strike, you remember those problems, you remember like when those were taking our clothes, when we were like, well, food punishment, just. And when the year passed, we start remembering our brothers, the one who died, the one who their names were scratched on the metal, on the doors, on. So we started fight at Guantanamo for our freedom from the very first month, and we continued. And like trying to bring attention to the world, to our case. It was a simple message. We are human here. And even through our arts, through our protest, but even all of, in spite of that, always the US government view our activities as jihad, as activities of terrorism within the camp itself, and always being carried there to justify their response to the in the camp. So those activities, like in the media and such activities, it helps a lot. It helps to keep Guantanamo case alive and push forward to close to be closed. And I hope and pray that Biden will honor his promise to close it, and I hope it's not gonna happen again. But from what I can see now, Guantanamo is everywhere. I can see it either like China, I can see it in Saudi Arabia, I can see it in UAE, where there's like one of the cases I want to talk about today. It's like living in the shadow of Guantanamo. There is some brothers who were released to United Arab Emirates in 2016. They still in jail there. And we have been trying for the last 5 years to get any contact with them through lawyers, through any human rights organization, through anyone, but we couldn't. Like, I got some news from the families. When they arrived at that place, they spent 70 days blindfolded and shackled to the wall. 4 Afghanis were released, I think 2 years ago, 1.5 years. One of those men died only a few months after he died. And when I talked to him, he said, "Wallahi, I was detained by the Soviet Union. I was detained in Bagram, in Kandahar, in Guantanamo. I haven't seen worse than the treatment in the UAE prison." 2 men totally lost their minds, like Abdel Qadir and Bilal Abu Samh. Totally, they crazy. So those men were allowed to talk to their families or have connection to the lawyers, or to the ICRC. No one is still there. We have also other brothers who still live in the stigma of Guantanamo in Kazakhstan, in Albania, and because when Trump came to the White House in 2016 or 17, he just shut down the office which was responsible of the released detainees, and many governments, they felt they are not obliged to do anything. So it was like a treaty between the United States government and those countries. So everything has changed. There was like a setup of program for rehabilitation, integration, but nothing happened at all. So how much time do I have left, guys? So I don't want to. 2 minutes? Okay, so what I want to say here, I would like to thank you all for everything you have done, especially Andy and all of you for everything you have done for us there. And it's our duty now to continue the fight until those people get released, and to help those who still, even though released and still like suffer afterlife after Guantanamo. And I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I get my freedom early. So should I I was given this chance also to help my brothers, and in any way I could. And Alhamdulillah, my book is coming in the upcoming summer. It is called "Don't Forget Us Here." It covers almost like 15 years of life of Guantanamo. It's cover even like everything that I tried to cover: the detainees' life, the guards, the animals, the relationship between detainees and guards. And I hope you will enjoy reading this book. And again, I thank you all, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all.
Thank you so very much, Mansour. I know I can barely speak. It was so kind of you to give us your time and your experience. We really, really appreciate it. Again, the question and answer period will be after the last speaker. And don't forget to take a peek at the links in the chat. Our last speaker will be former Captain James Yee. James Yee is the author of the book For God and Country and Faith and Patriotism Under Fire. The link for his book is in the chat. James Yee is a former captain in the United States Army. Shortly after graduating from West Point, he converted to Islam. He was one of the first Muslims to enter the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps. He was assigned to Guantanamo prison in 2003. This was the beginning of a chilling and painful awakening that is documented in his book. Captain Yee's role as chaplain meant it was his job to advocate for the free exercise of worship. Captain Yee expressed his outrage as a chaplain, as a Muslim, and as a soldier, witnessing the violation of human rights. After 10 months at Guantanamo, Captain Yee was arrested in Jacksonville, Florida, while on a 2-week leave for carrying suspicious documents. He was shackled and blindfolded, and soundproof earmuffs were placed over his ears. The same sensory deprivation tactics inflicted on prisoners at Guantanamo, he said. He was taken to a U.S. Navy brig in Charleston, South Carolina, where he spent 76 days in solitary confinement. Captain Yee was ultimately charged with sedition, aiding the enemy, spying, espionage, and failure to obey a general order. He faced the death penalty. And yet, no evidence against him was ever presented. In 2004, all criminal charges were dropped. He resigned from the military, was granted an honorable discharge, and even received a medal for exceptional meritorious conduct. Mr. Yee said he credits his survival to his faith as a Muslim, his ethnicity, he had been referred to as that Chinese Taliban, and his patriotism. Thank you so much for joining us today, James.
Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Can everyone hear okay? Okay, great. First, I'd like to say that it's an honor and pleasure to be with everyone here today to share my experience as the chaplain who served at the prison camp in Guantanamo Bay back in 2002 and 2003. I know Mansour and I know Andy. We often communicate about these issues, and I've known Andy for a long time since he's been advocating and blogging about Guantanamo. And more recently, Mansour, connected with Mansour when he was released. And it's an honor to share the stage, so to speak, with these two great individuals. Today, I just want to share a little bit about my experience at Guantanamo from the perspective as a military chaplain, a Muslim chaplain who served in Guantanamo at the prison camp, and as such became a person who was a witness to the abuse and torture at Guantanamo. And I'm coming from that perspective. But before I do so, I want to address some of the things that Mansour had said and respond. He had mentioned that the youngest prisoner, he mentioned the name of who he said was the youngest prisoner, but who I think he mentioned was like 17 or 18. But in fact, there were actually 3 prisoners who were younger than that, who were not held in the general population, and perhaps Mansour didn't even know that they were there at the time because they were separated. These 3 individuals were 12 to 14 years old, boys. There were 3 individuals who were 12 to 14 years of age from Afghanistan that were held in a facility known as Camp Iguana. Their names were Muhammad Ismail, Naqibullah, and Asadullah. And again, they were at oldest they were 14 years old, boys held in Guantanamo. And when we look at the records, actually, some of the organizations, some of the human rights organizations have documented that in terms of international law, juvenile enemy combatants, as they were called in Guantanamo, if you're saying juvenile under the age of 18, there were at least 15 individuals in Guantanamo who were under the age of 18, possibly 21 individuals. There were 6 individuals who perhaps could have been younger than 18 when they arrived, but it's been documented that there were at least 15 who were under the age of 18, and then including in those were the 3 individuals who were 12 to 14. And at Guantanamo, what had happened was if an individual was 15 years or older, they were held in general population. So these 3 individuals who were 14 and under were held separately. And as far as I know, none of the other prisoners at Guantanamo at the time were aware that there were prisoners this young that were being held elsewhere in the camps of Guantanamo. That's one thing. The second thing I want to address is Mansour talked about how they were punished when they went on hunger strike, and when it got so bad that the hunger strike got to the point where the medical command would force feed the individuals to keep them alive, so they wouldn't die from hunger striking. And that process itself was torturous, and where a tube was lubed with petroleum jelly or some other type of lubricant, inserted through the nostril into the throat, and force fed with a milkshake type drink like Ensure, right? So just that process itself was torturous. However, it's been documented that there were some cases in which I believe, I'm not sure if it was either in where these incidences occurred, but there were incidences which I have read about, which were called rectal rehydration, where instead of inserting the tube through the nose, it was inserted through the rectum. And at one point, I even read an incident where they used not a liquid, but some type of solid food to do that, and it was hummus, right? In my view, this is rape, right? This is sexual assault, not a force feeding technique to keep someone alive because they're hunger striking, right? I actually had to do my research to find out where these incidences occur, if they indeed actually happened at Guantanamo or elsewhere, like in the CIA black sites, where the handful of prisoners who were still at Guantanamo were held for 5 years prior to being brought to Guantanamo. But from my perspective, as a chaplain and as a witness against torture, witness to the torture and abuse, my focus at Guantanamo was religious support, providing religious rights to the prisoners at Guantanamo, because ultimately that's the primary role of a chaplain in the U.S. military, to protect the free exercise of worship, to protect the religious rights of individuals who serve in the military, of individuals who serve on a military installation, and of individuals who may be incarcerated or imprisoned by the U.S. military. Indeed, that was the situation in Guantanamo. So my primary role was that of protecting the religious rights of these Muslim prisoners in Guantanamo. And no doubt, because I was a Muslim chaplain, that was the reason why I was chosen to go to Guantanamo and be the chaplain there. But let's look at some of the things that happened, the abuse of prisoners in Guantanamo with regard to religion. And I've often stated that religion in Guantanamo was used as a weapon against the prisoners in persecuting these men, religious persecution. And it could be as simple as, for example, when Muslims in Guantanamo were making their prayers, guards would perhaps stomp down the corridors to interrupt or to make loud noises while the men were praying. Or maybe they would throw rocks or stones at the prisoners while they were making their prostrations in prayer, right? Or it could be as simple as the guard force turning off the water prior to prayer. Because as Muslims, we wash ritually before prayer and then we pray. So sometimes the guards would intentionally turn the water spigots off so that the prisoners could not wash before the prayer. And this would always end up in the disturbances, the riots, the protests from the prisoners, because guards would do this intentionally, right? Because they knew that Muslims wash before prayer, right? It could also be as simple as when I was able to ensure that the call to prayer was made 5 times a day at Guantanamo. The persecution could be as simple as when that call to prayer was being made over the loudspeaker, guards would yell or scream or play music, right? Or mock the call to prayer, right? These are just simple ways in which how religion was being used as a weapon in Guantanamo. But things could get worse. For example, at one point, the commander of the detention operation, who I directly reported to, he was a colonel, he wanted to implement a forced beard shaving as punishment for prisoners. And at one point he came to me and said what he wanted to do was he wanted to implement this as a disciplinary measure, especially for prisoners who would be forcefully extracted from their cell from whatever reason. Because that process entailed the riot force coming and responding by spraying pepper spray and then dragging that prisoner around. So the commander tried to make a reasoning that because that prisoner was doused with pepper spray, that out of hygiene purposes, that those individuals would need to have their beards shaven because that pepper spray would be in their hair, right? But in actuality, it was a way to try and punish prisoners, because as Muslims, some believe that it's an obligatory practice to have to wear a beard as a Muslim male. And by and large, most all the prisoners followed that practice. But even worse than that, I heard the stories from the prisoners themselves of some of the things that occurred in the interrogation rooms. For example, a prisoner complained once about how inside one of the interrogation rooms was marked on the floor of this interrogation room a large circle, which was fashioned as a symbol, a satanic symbol. And it was understood by the interrogators that Muslims who believe in the oneness of God, a pure monotheistic belief in God, that the Muslim prisoners held strong to this belief in one God, and in an attempt to break prisoners from this faith would force that prisoner shackled in the center of what was a satanic circle and tried to force Muslims to bow down and prostrate in the center of this satanic circle, while the interrogators would scream at them that Satan is your God now, not Allah, not God the Almighty. Right? So this was using our faith, using religious belief in one God against the prisoner by forcing them to prostrate in a satanic circle. That was one method, or one tactic. Another would be the attacking of very orthodox practice where Muslim male and female limit physical contact out of respect for each other. A Muslim male who refuses to have physical contact with a female does that out of respect for not only himself, but also his female family members, like his wife or his daughters or his aunts, right? That physical contact is reserved for immediate family, a person's spouse, not an not another woman or female who's not married to him. Right? The interrogators attacked this practice by employing female interrogators. I believe they were female interrogators who would perform what you might call scandalous lap dances on the shackled prisoner who sat in their chair unable to resist. Right? There were complaints that I received in which prisoners complained how female interrogators would grab the genitals of Muslim male prisoners in the course of an interrogation session. Right? These being done because they understood, these interrogators, whether they were military or civilian interrogators, understood that practice of limited physical contact between the sexes. I recently saw the film The Mauritanian, in which they showed some of the interrogation techniques. So one of the scenes had the woman, you know, straddled over the prisoner, performing this type of lap dance, so to speak, or sexual assault type conduct on the prisoner, right? And then another way in which religion was being used, something that hit the media shortly after I left Guantanamo, and that was the issue of the desecration of the Koran. So military and civilian interrogation understood the belief of Muslims in how we respect the Koran and what we believe of the Koran, that we hold that the words of the Koran are the literal words of God, the literal words of Allah, and that even in our homes, we put the Koran on the highest shelf in our home out of respect and reverence. The desecration of the Koran was used, the abusing of the Koran in front of a shackled prisoner, or in the course of a cell search in the cell blocks, was done because they understood our reverence and respect for the what we believe is the words of God. So this is how religion was being used as a weapon, and those were the things that I tried to address to the command, because it's, in my view as a chaplain, it was unethical. However, the perspective that the command took was that prisoners had no rights, no legal rights, and certainly no religious rights in Guantanamo, and that perhaps by bringing me as a Muslim chaplain to Guantanamo was perhaps a show or a display to try and show the world that we were actually being respectful of religion in Guantanamo, when the opposite was the case. I want to conclude here and allow that time for the questions and answers, but I hope you're able to see where I was coming from as a chaplain in the U.S. military, in my role in trying to protect and preserve the free exercise of worship for prisoners at Guantanamo. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing what must be very difficult for both you and Mansour. We will have our question and answer period next, and that will be led by Ann Barron, Cheryl, and Julie, pardon me.
Hi, my name is Ann Barron. I'm with the Peace Resource Center of San Diego, and I'll be facilitating the question and answer period. We're actually going to use the next few minutes to think about the questions we want, and then we're going to post them. So instead of posting into the chat, what you will be doing is you'll be using the chat to send those questions that you have either to myself, to Cheryl, and also to Julie. Those are the three people that have the Q&A next to our names. And so what we'll then do is to read your questions aloud, and then have the panelists react to them. If you want a specific panelist to react to the question first, please put that into the question. And if you want your name to be read aloud, then also add your name to the question. So we're going to use the next, let's say 3 or 4 minutes for y'all to think about the questions. We've had some really disturbing, just disturbing memories of what has happened at Guantanamo. We also are going to be reflecting on the basically how these practices in Guantanamo are now prevalent in US as well. So that's the flashback that we've had from the US military practices abroad now coming back home. And we'll be reflecting on that as well. So we're going to give y'all about a 3 to 4 minute bio break. You can either turn off your videos or leave them on as you like. And then we'll come back and start at let's say 1:18. That's Pacific Standard Time. So in 4 minutes, okay? So take a break, write your questions, send them to Cheryl, Ann, or to Julie, and then we'll start the Q&A in about 4 minutes. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I think we're going to get started in the interest of time. We've had some questions coming in, and I'm going to start now. And this is to everybody. I've put some questions already into the chat. Those are questions that were coming to me as I was listening to the speakers today. But we also have a question from Donna Buell. And what she is asking is, how would you characterize the forces, those entities, the institutions that kept Obama from closing Guantanamo? So we remember that this is the first time, this is not the first time that we have tried to shut down Guantanamo. It is a blight on the I don't want to say the reputation of the United States, because I don't really want to get into what the reputation of the United States is these days, but it definitely is a stain on human rights. And so if this is a question to any panelists that would like to address it, how would you characterize the forces that kept President Obama from closing Guantanamo? Andy? So you are muted. There you
Yeah,
go.
am I unmuted? Yeah, well, I think the Republicans were extremely cynical. I think they worked out that they had nothing to lose by bashing everything that President Obama made to try and close Guantanamo. And you know, the difference now is that Obama, I have to say, sadly, rather squandered his first, because that was the only time he actually had a majority of Congress, and lost it in his midterms, and in his second term he was up against you know, a Republican majority. Whereas at the moment President Biden is in a very good position of actually having a majority in Congress. Also a matter, I think, of some things may need doing with Congress, other things don't. It isn't as though everything has to be done through Congress. So what he has to do, and what we have to encourage the Democrats to do, is to believe how right and appropriate it is that Guantanamo is closed. Because otherwise all the negative voices start coming about how you're threatening our national security and all of this rubbish. Because, you know, as we've heard so eloquently from Mansour, the truth about Guantanamo is that although a few people there have been accused of serious crimes, and very serious in the case of 9/11, the vast majority of the men who have been held there never were. And actually, even of the men who are still held, there are so many of those people who simply do not pose a threat to the United States. So it's trying to work with the positive aspects of why Guantanamo needs closing to overcome the negative stories that will always be played by people who want to portray anyone who wants to close Guantanamo as being soft on terrorism.
Right.
You know, when that clearly is not the case. If someone has allegedly committed a crime and can be prosecuted for it, it should happen. But we're still stuck in the position where, as Mansour was talking about, Cy Fuller, the oldest prisoner in Guantanamo, a man with love for everybody, mistakenly implicated in an Al-Qaeda plot, is still held at Guantanamo and has had several heart attacks. We are still in the position where people who are no more significant than Mansour was, people in Guantanamo who are charismatic, who are artistic, who are religious, who are working for the betterment of the conditions in which their fellow prisoners are held, are regarded simply because of that as a threat, and therefore the authorities don't want to release them. I think, you know, the more that we can put across the stories of the people who are still held, even though they're insignificant, I think that really helps as well.
So the narrative I'm hearing is also very important in changing the narrative with the Republicans. And I was thinking, you reminded me as you were talking of the Poor People's Campaign, which uses the narrative, the focus on a moral versus an immoral government. And so it's the moral campaign, the right thing to do. Is that what I hear
Right,
you saying? Yeah. Thank you for that. There's a lot to think about. It's politics as well. I was wondering if any of the other panelists would like to add to that, what was said already. James, did you want to speak?
Yeah. So let me make some commentary on this, and this is very personal to me, because after I got out of the military, when Barack Obama ran for president as a constitutional law expert who promised to close Guantanamo, I supported him fully, to the extent that I was elected in Washington State as a national delegate so that he would become the primary candidate for the 2008 election campaign over Hillary Clinton. And my support was based on his promise to close Guantanamo. The questioner asked, what do we think of the forces that prevented Barack Obama from closing Guantanamo? And with regard to the Republicans, my view is that the Democrats on Guantanamo are just as weak as the Republicans. Because when President Obama tried to bring prisoners from Guantanamo to the United States to try them in federal courts, and he was successful in doing that with one prisoner, many of the Democrats also said, not in my backyard are you bringing Guantanamo prisoners to my state. In addition, they helped pass the legislation which would prevent President Obama from using federal funding to set up a new prison in the United States or to bring prisoners to the United States from Guantanamo. So often we saw the case where President Obama blamed Congress for his failure to close Guantanamo. So, and I believe like in the first 2 years of the Obama administration, I almost want to say that he had control, that the Democrats also had control of Congress until it swung back to control of the Republicans like 2 years later, right, at the midterms, right? But I think in the very beginning, I think the Dems had also had control of the House and Senate when Obama was first elected. But President Bush opened Guantanamo with an executive action. So I believe that it's within the authority and within the power of the president and then President Obama to close Guantanamo with executive action, regardless of the legislation that was passed. And that's actually an option that perhaps President Biden has to attempt to close Guantanamo, bring prisoners to the United States, try them in federal courts, and then see if that would stand up in the courts on the basis that if that's not done, then the U.S. is being unjust and holding prisoners unlawfully, indefinitely, without charge, right? But this is listen to this quote that President Biden said, that then Vice President in 2009 at the Munich Security Conference, soon after President Obama was elected and Biden was the vice president. At the Munich Security Conference, Biden was quoted as saying, "We will uphold the rights of those who we bring to justice, and we will close the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay." Right? So the broken promise of the Obama administration really now is in the Biden court, and it's really on him to carry through with Obama's promise to close Guantanamo and take the next step and himself do it. But I believe that President Biden today can do it with an executive action.
Hi, thanks for that, James. Can I just add something? Can you hear me?
Please, I can. Yes, please do.
I mean, it's interesting that, you know, even 8 years ago, there were some people thinking that there were really 3 categories of prisoner at Guantanamo. There were the men who should be released, there were the men who should be charged, and there were men who could continue to be held as something to do with the laws of war. Not that the Geneva Conventions have ever applied, but that this kind of battlefield context that you can hold people until the end of hostilities, which has always kind of run parallel to the illegal story of Guantanamo, because you can take people off a battlefield and you can hold them until the end of hostilities. I think the interesting thing now with 40 men held at Guantanamo and with Joe Biden as president is that it's now nearly 20 years. Let's all of us remember that on January the 11th next year, the prison will have been open for 20 years. Now, apart from anything else, we appear to be in the endless war that the Bush administration said we were in, a war that spans the entire globe and that has no end. That seems to me to be totally unacceptable. But it's also unacceptable to have this notion that you can continue holding people indefinitely without charging them until the end of hostilities when it's such an extraordinary amount of time. There are 12 of the 40 men who are charged or have been through something to do with the military commission process. It's kind of a separate discussion that we need to have as to whether the military commissions are such a broken system that they don't work, which is what I think, and that anyone who's going to be charged should be tried in federal court. But I think that what we need to say to the Biden administration is, if you're not going to try prisoners, you have to start making the arrangements now to release everybody else who's still held. That's 28 men. And, you know, there are allegedly serious charges against some of these other men who have never been officially charged. But I think it's time to say, if you're not going to charge them, let us start making resettlement proposals for sending these people back to their home countries, to third countries if that is required because they can't be returned to their homes. But to finally do away with this notion that one component of Guantanamo is indefinite imprisonment without charge or trial, because that has never been acceptable. And with 20 years coming up, I would love to see the prison closed. If we can't get it closed by January, at least to have repudiated the notion that there is something acceptable about indefinite imprisonment without charge or trial, because there isn't.
So that's actually a wonderful segue. We have time for a few more questions, but we are going to have a call to action to Congress after this, demanding that our senators support President Biden's work to shut down Guantanamo. And you just gave us some wonderful talking points for that call to action. So thank you for that. We do have time for, I would say, 3 more questions, perhaps. And so, Julie, I'm going to pass it on to you. Did you receive any questions in the chat?
Yes, I did. I have a question that was actually a clarification for Mansour. Says, I thought I heard him say there was a detainee there as young as 1 month old. Was that misheard, or can you respond to that?
No, it's actually, that what happened there, like in 2002, when I moved from the solitary confinement to Eco Block, I found an Afghani man, like, I was talking to a brother that said, like, everyone, like, when he was taken to the hospital to see his son, I said, like, I asked my friends, are you serious? 1 month, he said, yes, they brought him, they suspected he was a son of Osama bin Laden because the boy was, the father and the boy was injured. So like they strapped him up and someone sold him to the CIA in Pakistan. They told him this is related to Osama bin Laden. So the boy spent his first year at the hospital at Guantanamo. And this is one of the like hurt us most. They would give him like either every 2 weeks or 1 month a visit to see his son there and just perform behind the glass and so on. And he was released, like I think in 2003 he was released. This is one of the things like still unknown at Guantanamo. Even like I kept asking my brothers over and over again, like, are you sure? And like, yes, they said, we are sure about the story. So like, I was like, I'm imagining things. No, they said no. So I wanted to put it in my book too. Like, as I told you before, Guantanamo serves no purpose, no security, no safety for anyone. It's a waste of not lives, money, time. Imagine now like 40 detainees, 100, like 1,700 guards for detainees. Like, what's the purpose of Guantanamo from what served from the beginning till now? Does Guantanamo make American feel safer? It's just a big must need to be clean. And I hope like it will be closed. I mean, there's other like stories, horrible stories. Just one of the simplest I want people to know. I think James Yee saw it was my neighbor, 105 years old. Like, even I have photo of this guy. I think Andy knows about the story too. So like, it is just a crazy place. You know, like, there's a lot to talk about.
Thank you very much. And I have another question, if I can find it here, which actually kind of is related to what you were saying about how crazy it is there. And it was, what do people who were in Gitmo, or what did people think in Gitmo as the reasons for their detention? What did their family members think? Was that ever, discussed or whatever? That was from Paul.
You know, are you asking me?
Yes, because you were there.
For us there, as I told you, we lived there. Even the interrogations, we were interrogated with different CIA, FBI, NSA, and other branches, even like other delegations from other countries who are also interrogating us, like from other Arab countries or other countries. We had no idea what were they looking for. Like, for example, I was accused to be Al-Qaeda general, 9/11 insider, and they said I was a general close to Osama bin Laden. And I was taken to the black side. I was tortured, even in Guantanamo. I was in sleep deprivation. And you're like, I have like different file and different cases. And I like, you know what, just pick up one case and stick to it. Like, it's like said guy, like they said, no, you weren't that like an Egyptian guy. They said you're mistaken. Then they said, no, you were close to Osama bin Laden. By 2014, they said in my PRP, they said he didn't play any significant role to Al-Qaeda. No one from Al-Qaeda leaders or Al-Qaeda member recognized him as part of Al-Qaeda. After I was cleared by the PRP, a colonel from the Navy, he said, Mansour, I would like to say something to you. I would like to apologize for wanting to go further along. It's unofficial, but we cannot say to the world we held innocent man for 15 years. We had to say something at least. And I told them, this is hurt more than anything, you know. And like, one of my accusations, they said in the secret accusation, they said he is smart and he has the ability of leading and gathering people. Like, and they, like, our behavior in the detention, this is how they judge us there. It's not what we have before going, because they have nothing against us. And over again, like, even when I arrived here in Serbia, I was accused the same thing. You are Al-Qaeda general. I said, look, I have been there 15 years. Do you think American CIA and FBI is stupid to send a general to Serbia? But we have now Guantanamo become a part of us. We have to live with it. So we know ourselves. It just, you know, sometimes we stopped thinking about it for a long time because it doesn't make any sense. We're laughing at the interrogator. So, like, today I am a general. Tomorrow I will be Osama bin Laden. Do you think? You know, even the interrogators, they said, we didn't know. We just have some question to ask you. But it was purpose of Guantanamo was to train interrogators, to train guards. It was also, like, as I told you, it was a lab to experimental on people there, like, in simple words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mansour. And you were making me think that it is basically, just in a nutshell, they had no idea who almost everybody was when they arrived at Guantanamo. I mean, the instructions that were handed down to the people on the ground in Afghanistan were that every single Arab has to be sent to Guantanamo. No excuses. So people like Mansour were arriving at Guantanamo. They didn't know who they had. The purpose then was to establish that the opposite was true, that actually everybody they'd got were the worst of the worst, because that's what their leaders were telling them. So then interrogations were based around finding out how to present everybody as somebody significant, not to accept that they weren't anybody significant. And then once you've done that, then you've labeled these people as so significant that puts all the obstacles up as to why they should be released. It's kind of catch-22ing in all kinds of horrible, horrible ways. And this is what, you know, the United States government doesn't want to admit how colossal their mistakes were at every level, because it's really shameful and embarrassing. It really is. But, you know, as hopefully everyone tonight has heard, when you hear from Mansour, when you hear from the people subjected to this absurd but horrible scenario, you know, the impacts are on their lives. But it is, I think, completely true that this was a failure of intelligence on the most colossal scale.
So I'm going to interrupt then. This is actually a great point, because actually I'm feeling that it was done by design. So that's a whole other conversation about how things have raveled out or unraveled. We do have a request. We really don't have time for more questions, but we have a request from 2 students who want the speakers on today's panel to come and participate in a peace discussion they're going to have at their school. So I can message you privately on that and put you in touch with those students. If you're able to participate or at least respond to them, that would be great. And I know, Cheryl, did you get any questions? I know that
I did get some.
Okay. So I think what we can do is to send the questions directly to the panelists, since we have run out of time for this section, and then send the responses back to those who've asked the questions. And we can also post them on the Facebook. And I also wanted to point out that we have posted into the chat, there is a Facebook group that we're putting together to generate an activated group that's going to work with President Biden and make sure that we can finally close Guantanamo. So that opens up for the next part of today's show. I don't want to call it a show, actually, but this is a cry from the heart. And this part is where we actually are going to do some direct action. We are going to call our senators and we're going to make some demands. So I'm going to share my screen with you all and show you the demands that we have put together that speak to what has already been spoken during the past hour and a half. So
while
yes?
you're doing that, Anne,
Sure.
we also had Andy that was going to, was it at this point that Andy was going to do his song?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. I'll wait on that. I've been waiting for this. Yes. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah. Andy, we're very fortunate. Andy's going to sing his song live for us, Fighting for Injustice.
I'll keep it short and sweet then, because we're, you know, there's still so much to be done, obviously, from certain things. But I'll play a verse and a chorus of it, and you know, I hope you like it. Look at this world in decline. Despite all the victories that were fought for, centuries spent struggling for the vote, and for our right to healthcare and education. But now we're running out of time. Our politicians are turned into pimps and hoes. Our NHS is being choked, and there are no jobs for the young in this broken down nation. That's why we say, if you ain't fighting injustice, you're living on the dark side. Oh yeah. If you ain't fighting injustice, you're living on the dark side. Oh yeah.
Thank you, Andy. And now we will do our call to action, led by Anne and Cheryl.
Hi, everybody. So this is the call of action. This is really where we take everything we just heard, the heartache, the sorrow, the pain, the knowledge that this is part of our country as a democracy. It's unbelievable. So the call to action now. Hello, Cheryl.
Will I be reading my story?
Yes.
Okay.
So our call to action actually begins with blowback, and the blowback it's a book that was written that explains how all of the U.S. policies, all of our practices, all of our covert actions around the world are blowing back onto U.S. citizens and residents, people living here on the homeland, in ways that we hadn't anticipated. The book is great. It's called Blowback, and Cheryl Hansen is here to talk about the blowback from the torture in prisons to here in her own life here in San Diego. So Cheryl, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your story.
Thank you, Anne. I'm Cheryl Campton, and I'll be reading. I had to write down because my mind, there's so much, so I had to write it down. Okay, I'm Cheryl Canson, and I'm here to shine a light on another torturous injustice and human rights violation happening across our nation and in all jails, prisons, and detention centers. It is when a mentally ill person is sentenced to incarceration in one of those state institutions aforementioned, and the mental health treatment is inadequate. I can attest to this because I have two mentally ill sons that were receiving mental health treatment at young, and when experiencing a manic episode were sentenced to prison without any consideration of their mental health history nor continued mental health needs. COVID has added another layer of trauma to the mentally ill incarcerated of our loved ones. Now, I'm aware that we all are suffering traumatic effects of COVID, but some are better able to adapt than others. Since COVID, my son, incarcerated, one of them, has been brutally beaten by prison guards at New Folsom State Prison twice. He contracted COVID and thank God has healed, but without much treatment for COVID, just temperature checks. COVID affecting packages, food, mail, phone calls, and visits, and mental health treatment, down to the mentally ill person asking for help, which shows lack of education, has shown detrimental for my mentally ill son and countless others like him. I have made several attempts at getting my son released due to COVID, but requests were denied in spite of his pre-existing medical conditions. COVID has brought on psychosis for my son. He has said, "Mom, I've been thinking about killing myself." He needs to be restored and help to regain balance. This didn't happen. My mentally ill son was brutally beaten by prison guards on January 23rd, 2021, in response to his psychosis. Even though he was in handcuffs, he's being accused of being provoking, and this is in the notes, so they say it's justified. He was taken to the hospital to receive emergency services for his nose being broken and fractured bones in his face, having to have reconstructive surgery. To add insult to injury, he was returned to the prison and placed in isolation. I was scheduled to visit last weekend, but the link was not sent to me by my son. And so I was unable to visit him, and I fear that that was intentional. It said to me that I did not need to see the appearance of my son. My son should not be alone for fear of retaliation by CDCR, and he's more able to be successful at committing suicide. I know that less eyes on him means no witness, and he's left to his own devices. It's not a good thing. We fear for my loved one's life, and I'm trying to have him move to receive treatment to be nursed to health. I have founded an initiative, Treat Me, Don't Mistreat Me. The Me is MI for mental illness, where I advocate that mentally ill people deserve treatment, not to be thrown in cages and tortured and violently attacked, assaulted by prison guards. I've included in the chat the Facebook page, Treat Me, Don't Mistreat Me, and also a petition that I'm asking my people support this action, as what affects one of us affects us all. And I'm a firm believer that what we hear, what we see with our senses makes us responsible to respond. Thank you.
My heart goes out to you. And I know, Cheryl, that you have a lot of people who are rooting for you and for your sons, and we're here to support you. So there is a petition, there is a phone call, there is a lot of work being done here on the ground to support prisoners who've been unjustly imprisoned in the US system. And we see the connections, so deeply see the connections between what's happening in our military prisons and how that blows back into our civilian prisons. So we're going to start the call to action. And what you're going to need for this call to action is your cell phone. So grab your cell phones, and you are going to make a phone call to the US Capitol switchboard and ask to speak with your senator. Of course, today is Saturday, and they're not there, but you can leave a voicemail. After you leave a voicemail, feel free to follow up with an email as well. Now, we have some suggested text to you for the call to action. I'm going to share my screen, but feel free also, from what you've heard from today, to add to the call to action. You're speaking to your representative, you're telling her or him what you need to see them do to make sure that we're defending everybody's human rights. And that's what this is all about, right? Everyone's human rights. Everyone is human. So this call to action it starts today. It actually started a while back, but it continues today and it can't end today. So we will continue to advocate, push for, demand, interrupt, interfere with, until we get Guantanamo shut down. Guantanamo is a symbol of all of what is wrong with US, our dependence on the military, our aggression towards one another, and we start the chain. So I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to ask you to pull out your cell phones and get to work. Let's see, this should do it. So really, you're going to be calling Congress. The phone number is right there. A switchboard operator will talk with you and ask you who you want to speak with. Say you want to speak with your senators. Now the message, you got to say your name and who you're a constituent of. And then this was the script that we've written down if you can't think of really what you want to say on the spot. But feel free to add what you need to add that speaks to your heart and what you want to see happen. With respect to Guantanamo, our international agreements on human rights, and all other issues having to do with our militarized sort of overreach empire. All right, so get on your phones and get started. I'm going to mute myself so I don't. So, you know,
And please feel free to report your chat. Report what happened on chat.
Hi, Sean, it's Karen. Huh? No. Hey, you scared me. I'm almost done.
Okay, so it looks like pretty much everyone is done. California, it turns out we have a new senator, Senator Padilla. So you might have to call back twice to get to both of the senators, Feinstein and Padilla. I'm going to now invite you to continue, follow up with an email to your senators. You can also follow up with an email to also your congressional representatives. And we need to keep the push on. Again, sign up or join the group that's created on the event page to keep the pressure on. So I'm going to pass it over to Doreen now as we finish out. If you haven't finished your phone call, keep going for it, but I'm going to pass it over to Doreen. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to thank each and every one of you for attending this event and working to make sure that the Guantanamo prison is closed. Let's put an end to this shameless episode and close Guantanamo now. I want to thank the committee members who worked hard to make this event happen. Pat Alviso, Jan Meslin, Kathleen Hernandez, Julie Alley, Susan Kopecki, Ann Barron, Cheryl Canson, and our fabulous Zoom technician, JB. We also need to thank the organizations that sponsored and promoted this event. Veterans for Peace LA, Veterans for Peace National, Veterans for Peace San Diego, Peace Resource Center of San Diego, Orange County Peace Coalition, Answer LA, Poor People's Campaign, CodePink, World Can't Wait, and Refuse Fascism. Goodbye, everyone, and please all stay safe, and thank you.